Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever or whenever you may be. This is the overnight. I'm DM Foss, and joining me is Sharon Hinchcliffe. How you doing, Sharon?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight a lot.
I'm happy to
Um,
have you here. Always happy to have you here.
I'm always happy to help out with y'all. History is geopolitical history with geography has been outside of the Second Amendment and other political history within the U.S. has always been a big um, uh, kind of a deep dive for me with this. So I'm really looking forward to this. And there's some really important information that a lot of people need to be aware of with what's going on. And there are some ramifications that make what's currently going on look very, very similar to the setup of World War One, based upon the history, based upon what's going on. So, looking forward to this.
Baron, um, you hanging in there?
What? Yeah, I've been up for a while, you could say.
Yeah, we did a fill-in chat earlier. It was only like a 1 hour chat, um, but
I'm gonna change my name to a insomniac. It's getting ridiculous at this point.
It can be. Just make sure you get some sleep to recharge your brain. So,
I nodded off for 5 minutes. Does that count?
No,
Okay.
unfortunately not. So, it's your show. I'm going to let you start with where we're going.
So I put out a poll. Should we discuss Russia's invasion of the Ukraine and what the consequences might come of it. 52% said yes, could lead to World War III. 19% said it's something going on, so maybe a little. 21% said no, it's nothing but a distraction. And the other option was you should discuss blank instead. Leave a comment. And we had a few comments. Sergeant Joe Smith said we should discuss Albert Einstein's theory of general relativity and the kinetic theory of matter. X Adam 1 said gun viewers have, and the stories behind them. And Gunmetal Guy USA gave us a cowboy thumb up. We had more people discuss something else than left comments for what to discuss that something else should be. So
They just wanted anything else than they didn't care.
So for anyone that if you choose the other option, please always leave a comment so that we know what you want or what your opinion is. I always want to hear your opinion. I may not agree with it, but I want to hear it. So out there so far was out there and in here, DJ Play Nice. How you doing, DJ?
I'm doing well. Pleased to be aboard.
Gunmetal Guy USA. Two Live Moo was out there earlier, but he's probably sound asleep in the barn right now.
I envy him.
G-Webs and Sergeant Joe Smith. He said he just came here to hear us talk about him, so we just talked about him. And I don't know if there's time at the end. Maybe we'll talk about cartoons. But so don't have any set format how to approach the topic. I just kind of got thinking about it because there's been a lot of discussion on the overnight Discord, which there's a link in the description for the Discord. Also for the Washington Civil Rights Association Discord. But there's been a lot of banter going on, so I thought I'd throw out a poll, see if other people want to talk about it. And out of 58 votes, most of them said, yeah, we kind of want to talk about it. So, so Russia invades the Ukraine. I'll say off the bat, I do not believe this is going to lead to World War III. It doesn't help that right off the bat, Biden says we're not going to, basically we're not going to fight Russia. And then I believe there is a change in policy for the nuclear where we are now a defensive only strategy, which I agree with the concept of it, but that first strike capability is a deterrent. I don't personally believe it'll come to that, just because everybody loses. That's what the mutually assured destruction. I don't know if everybody planned it to be that way, but that's the way it ended up. So, what are the consequences and how's this gonna shake out?
The first part on how this is going to shake out is how these sanctions are going to come around. These sanctions where we are not even on foodstuffs, which this is the first time I've ever seen this happening, to where grain and critical materials for agriculture are not being exempted. That is significant. where this is going to come from is the fact that Russia and Belarus are two of the largest suppliers of commercial fertilizer. The United States and Canada are not self-sufficient with fertilizer production. We require Russian fertilizer and Belarusian fertilizer. How this is going to impact everything? Petrol and petroleum-based fertilizers increase the food yield of wheat, barley, rice, oats by over 40%.
Yeah, Russia is number 4 in fertilizer production. The U.S. is, I think, number 3, behind Russia behind China. So is it China, the U.S.? There's somebody else in there. I forget.
There's going to be somebody else in there, and with the reduction on our refinery capabilities, we are not producing fertilizer. That's going to hurt us, and that's going to hurt a lot of countries, not just us. And with this, it's really telling for the production. We don't make enough for ourselves to be able to do this. One of the other things that's happened over the last 5 years with some of the weather issues that we've had in the mid part of the country, with the coastals called the flyover country, there's been massive storms, and to where either the harvest has not been able to be done in the Dakotas or in Nebraska or even parts of Iowa, or planting cannot be done because of storms, whether it's hail, whether it's flooding, ice storms, things like that. What that does is that has actually reduced our ability to produce wheat here in the U.S. So we're going to, where we used to produce well enough that we were able to export a significant amount of what we produced, we're not going to be doing that. Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. It produces, I want to say, between 40 to 60% of Western Europe's grain crops.
It's number 4 for wheat.
Yeah.
Worldwide, China, India, Russia, and then depending on what chart, I think Australia and Ukraine is either 5th, 6th, right in there, depending on what chart you look at. And so, so if you combine the fertilizer and then also the restrictions on the wheat, and then Russia invading Ukraine, which hampers that wheat production, that's a lot of wheat that's taken out of the system.
Yes, it is. And it's like, okay, so Iowa's not planting until next week. So that's going to be for the spring, and that's for the summer crop. So winter wheat is just being harvested, and that's depending upon whether or not they were able to get it in before some of the storms that are coming in. So that's something that does affect everything that's going on. So when we've got the hailing or the late blizzards or things like that, that prevents our crops from being harvested. Ukraine is not able to harvest their crops right now because it's a war zone, and you don't have individuals able to go in there. Used to have winter there until, and you don't have the manpower to harvest. You're not going to also have the available fuel for the tractors, or those tractors might be used for something else for the harvesters. With Russia, no ports are open for Russian ships. So the grains that are the grain shipments that are out are not able to drop off what they have currently. How is this going to matter? the majority of Russia and Ukraine's crops feed Africa and the Middle East. Egypt gets a significant portion of their crop, of their wheat crop, from either Ukraine or Russia. I can't remember which one it is, but I want to say it's like 60%. If they don't have the ability to import that grain, we're going to see food riots. Lebanon has less than a month's worth of wheat in their stores, in their silos. The last I saw might actually be less than 2 weeks at this time. They have no other way to be able to afford the prices of food crops from any place else. Everybody is scrambling. Lebanon also has a poverty rate of over 80%. They can't afford to pay the current value, the current pricing on the markets for these crops. You also have the same thing going on in Sudan. You have the same thing going on within Morocco. Morocco actually produces a lot of wheat, but they're in a 30-year drought. They do not have the ability to grow what they used to be able to grow. So these are the implications of the sanctions that are being put and placed on Ukraine and being placed on Russia, and then also on Belarus. Ukraine doesn't have the sanctions, but nobody's harvesting their grain.
And this also moves China up because they've for the last probably more than 20 years, but they've been moving into Africa. Their influence in
Belt Road Initiative.
So the food exports, and that's the crazy thing is if you get into watching the fake food that China has brought into Africa, like the fake rice, which is plastic, but that's a little off topic here. So that moves them up, and Russia is relying on China for more, so that also bolsters them as a world power.
You have the BRIC, which is a consortium that on the commodities within the economic exchange that was established, I want to say in around 2010, if not a little bit earlier, and that is Brazil, Russia, India, and China. So these were the next larger powerhouses of coming in. And what this does is that Brazil and India have also said that they are not going to honor the sanctions that NATO is putting in. India has sold rice and tea, rice and sugar, no, tea and sugar to Russia. So sugar is being sent via India to Russia right now. China, no matter what these sanctions are and going on, China and Russia share a very long, extensive land border. No sanctions are going to affect any part of that border that is currently going on. So you have nothing with the ships, nothing with planes or anything like that is going to affect any kind of trade between Russia and China across that border. And the same thing with India and some of theirs. There's a couple of countries in between the two of them, but ones that are not going to participate within the sanctions also. So the sanctions are really not much going to affect a lot of what's going on with that. So, good to know about the winter wheat. Is it corn that they put in Iowa for the winter, or is they just leave the fields fallow? Because I know the Dakotas will, in parts of Washington, do the winter wheats, and the same thing with parts of Canada. Okay, corn and soybeans. Yep. And soybeans are going out for the Chinese market. Brazil actually produces a lot of soybeans for China. And that's one of the things you want to see with everything that's going on. So when they talk about the wheat futures within the commodities markets going up, You have these are bets on what the price of the material is going to be per a specific amount, whether it's metric ton or something that way, is to have that's what they're betting on what the supplies are going to be, how much is going to be available, and what it's going to cost. The fact that Russia is accepting Bitcoin for petroleum purchases now, as well as the sale of petroleum to India for petroleum was done in rubles. So the danger with us in the United States is the elimination of the US dollar as the petrodollar. That will significantly devalue our financial system. So there's a lot of interplay going on with this. A number of years ago, people talked about the color revolutions that were happening that overturned the government in Egypt, Tunisia, and things like that. Those color revolutions happened because people couldn't eat. There wasn't any food. One of the individuals that started it off in Egypt was a individual who wasn't able to provide for his family, became so desperate, he self-immolated, set himself on fire in in front of one of the Egyptian government buildings. That started the revolution in Egypt. That changed everything over to where you ended up with the Muslim Brotherhood taking over at some point, and then eventually ending up within the current political state that they are in right now. So the messing with the food markets on top of the pandemic with the supply chain issues, this is going to be a problem. And this is why Russia going into Ukraine, invading into Ukraine now, does have does have global implications. If they're able to keep people to be able to be fed without massive losses of life, war will be prevented. If not, people will fight. Wars have started over the ability to feed children, to feed a family.
Switzerland has dropped their neutrality stance, where they have adopted the EU sanctions on Russia. I was going to make a Nazi gold joke, but we'll skip that. Which is, it's another thing that the invasion did is the Ukraine and Georgia are seeking to join the EU. So it has, since NATO wouldn't accept Ukraine after the invasion, it pushes two more countries into the EU. I am not an EU fan, but so that pushes two more countries towards the EU, and I haven't heard if they're going to accept them or not, because they're trying to trying to get it fast tracked, their application. It's yeah. On the back to the energy, Russia supplies 40% of Europe's natural gas and 25% of crude oil to Europe. The U.S. is still buying oil from Russia, which, that's one of their major money makers, so we're still paying them. And I understand why they're not doing that, but the sanctions have had an effect on the ruble is crashing. But us still buying, in general, our initial response was a mess, I think. We're sending conflicting signals. We're not going to fight you, but we're going to shake our fist at you and yell at you. And, for the most part, sanctions don't work. We'll say have not really worked, I don't think. You look at the countries that still exist that have been sanctioned for, Cuba or,
North Korea.
yeah. It is putting pressure on Russia, which I don't know, may actually be backfiring because it pushes them more into the Ukraine, I think, because they're losing what they're losing. They can kind of gain back by controlling the Ukraine.
It's interesting that they're only going to a specific section of Ukraine right now, which is that's the far eastern side. That's where Donbass and Mariupol and where Crimea is.
When this all started, that's what I thought Russia would push in, grab a small section that they wanted, and then kind of pull back to that section. But with how the problems that they're having with all the videos that you see of the dead tanks or the tanks that ran out of gas because their supply chain isn't there. Russia was not really ready for this, so their response now is they're just bombing the shit out of cities, which is kind of something that they do, but they were a tank force, but since they can't do it with their tanks, they're just leveling cities. And that's something I'm not sure how that should be dealt with. If it's a tank, they're killing the tanks, but they're just sitting back, they'll level a city and then move forward.
Yeah. They're still not going further in as much. I'm not seeing them going through Kiev. I butcher English, so I'm sure I'm butchering the capital of Ukraine. As much as I've seen in other types of skirmishes and things like that, and other types of wars and other types of acquisitions, and how Russia tried to go into Afghanistan during the late 80s, 90s, when they were going in through there, to where we were actually supplying arms to the Taliban. And yeah, Gunmetal Guy. Yes, Gunmetal Guy. I do agree with you on this. There's a lot of things that are not being said outside. I'm finding it to be very based upon how the media has been on everything dealing with COVID, everything dealing with some of the economic stuff, and now also with the laptop that the New York Post was banned off of Twitter last year or in 2020. There's a lot of things where the media, especially the major avenues, have had a severe issue with integrity on how they do reporting. There's also questions on how some of the stuff is being sent in. I know some of the stuff was debunked pretty early on when they were saying they were shooting planes down. That was actually video game recordings. What I'm finding interesting is to look at is some of the French government reports on what's being reported out of what France is reporting as how things are progressing. Very different from what is being said out of some of the English language channels. So there's some serious issues on what actually is happening. Russia wants a warm water port. Logistically and economically, yeah, I can see why they want that. They need that for trade. I'm also hearing some scrambles going on between the Curie Islands on Far East Russia, which is the disputed land between Russia and Japan. And those two countries never officially ended World War II. There is no peace treaty between those two. Those islands are still in dispute, and there has been issues back and forth on that side also. The Ural trucks. My understanding is that's where a lot of the tanks are being built out of, and there is an issue on supplies. Russia's population was decimated probably 20 years ago with alcoholism and tuberculosis. Russia has an issue with methicillin resistant and some of the other antibiotic resistant strains of tuberculosis in their prisons. And pretty much it's rampant. That is a decimating effect on their male populations and some of their female some of the females, some of the women who are released back out into the general public because there is no treating it, none whatsoever. Russia had an issue with replacement population. I want to say this was during Boris Yeltsin's time, so this is before Putin, where abortion was the primary form of birth control. And you would have issues of women having 6 or 7 abortions within a very short time frame to prevent having children that they didn't think they could take care of. This was after Gorbachev, so this is after the fall of communism, the fall of the Soviet Union. And the Boris Yeltsin came in, and so you had some serious issues with this. For a while, Russia was not having enough children to replace those who are dying. Russia does not have an extensive population as compared to the United States and to China and to India. So that is going to be one of the severe limiting factors on any type of warfare conflict that they have. Where are they getting their bodies? Where are they getting some of the stuff? And
about 10 years ago, there was a Putin did a push to increase birth rate.
Yes, he tried to get the birth rate increase, very similar to where what Singapore was doing to try and have family first. The families were celebrated. Mothers were given credits and things like that. So that is also a serious issue going on with it. And they don't have the men who are in their late 20s and early 30s having children now. Those men are not available to have the next generation. Some of those are being conscripted. You also had the Chechen rebellion that happened before Russia re-annexed Georgia, and the violence that was coming out of Chechnya was severe, absolutely severe. And you had a lot of suicide bombings. This is the Batalan theater incident where you had terrorists take over the theater, and Russia went in with smoke and chemical grenades to try to rescue.
Killed the terrorists and killed the hostages.
Yeah, killed a large amount of the hostages that were there.
Task failed successfully.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're like, we killed the terrorists, but we also killed a large portion of the hostages that were there. So that's during the same time. But you also had a lot of bombings going on then too, that weren't as reported in Western media as much, because we had our own issues going on with the Iraq issues with the Iraq war or the Iraq conflict. So it was never declared as war, and then also going on with Afghanistan at the same time. People were more focused on that than what was going on with the issues going on in Russia. And then that compounded everything else going on when they decided to run a oil pipeline through Syria, which is one of Russia's friendly nations, one of their partners and everything else. So Gunmetal Guy, you're asking about any reports of chemical warfare. I have not heard anything.
Yeah, there's all I've heard is everybody's talking about it could happen.
Yes.
But nobody has said it's actually happened.
Yeah, I've heard nothing from any intelligence reports, nothing at all where it's been confirmed. Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion. There's been a lot of discussion of biowarfare. The WHO and the U.S. Department, NIH has said, like, yes, the biolabs have been confirmed through a report to Congress from NIH that they are actually, they said it was for researching agricultural and disease and human diseases. Do I trust them? Does Operation Mockingbird sound like anything familiar, or Benton Woods, or Tuskegee? Yeah. A whole list of things to go with on conspiracy theories that were proven true. So I have not heard. Will it happen? Probably, in the sense that people know how to make these items. You have individuals who were alive during World War II, grandparents who may have passed that information on to their children or to their grandchildren or to their great-grandchildren. You do have individuals who do have the ability to pass that information on. Yeah, there was a gas pumped into it. I don't know if it was fentanyl that was put in there, but there was something that was also put in there to help neutralize everything. And yeah, you've got anybody with any kind of health issues or someone who is young, they're not going to be able to, they may not be able to survive a gas like that because of their weight may not be heavy enough to be able to withstand such a, because the anesthesia is all weight based besides other health issues. It's very, very things like that. The only thing that I can see for source on reporting for any chemical attacks, that's going to actually probably be coming from the satellite feeds to see if anything's changing and anything like that at all. Because so much cannot be verified, at least by another independent. Thank you, Sergeant Smith. Thank you for calling me a girl. I haven't been called that in a long time. I'm an old lady now. You have a lot of stuff that's going on where it can't be confirmed. Someone's taking a single report, someone else is sourcing that report saying they saw it here, and they're reporting that they saw it at source A, source reporting B saying that they came it from source A, reporter C cites source B, citing source A, and it just goes a whole way around, all based upon a single incident, a single reporting, or a single type of I saw this, without anything actually being verified that something did happen. So that is one of the things to really be careful with everything going on here. This is with everything coming on, with the internet, with how social media is going, with the ability to spread information, we're seeing stuff that you've not ever been able to see in time, that unless you were there, you weren't seeing. So there's a lot. Instead of conspiracy theories, instead of false flags being exposed 20, 30, 40 years later, like the Gulf of Tonkin from Vietnam, stuff's being exposed within days, sometimes within hours. And so that's the difficulty of finding reliable sources of people on the ground, because those who are on the ground are either going to be fighting for Ukraine or fighting for Russia. There's going to be very little independent or neutral sources at this time, unfortunately. And that's the difficulty.
I don't believe any chemical weapons would come from the Ukraine side. It would come from the Russian side.
I could see it from either side, to be honest. The Asimov Battalion is one that has ties back to Nazi Germany, with reports coming out of the Nuremberg trials. And that's the one location where I would see it coming from. The fact that before any of this happened, and I was surprised to see this data, that Ukraine was more corrupt than Russia. I was actually surprised about finding out about that. And with that, do I think it come from? I can see either side doing a false flag. I could see either side doing something like this, intentional, to escalate it up. Do I think we need to be doing a no-fly zone over Ukraine? Oh, hell no. Definitely not. That'll be the worst thing ever, because a no-fly zone requires it to be enforced with the downing of planes. That is an act of war. That would put us into World War III.
Yes, I agree with that. And it hasn't really been necessary, because Russia hasn't been using air superiority. And I've heard different reasons why, but it hasn't been a thing. So it's right now it's not necessary.
Right.
I'll be right back. I forgot to turn something off that's going to bother me. So keep going and I'll be right back.
Sure. Yeah, Azov. Thank you, M. Gabriel. And then make it seem like Isaac Asimov. No, not that name. Azov Battalion. And that would be the equivalent of having a sanctioned U.S. battalion that was specifically KKK, with what they are. So Ukraine is the history of Ukraine. There's actually 2 books that I would recommend dealing with everything with going on right now. And one is called The Borderlands. And let me see if I can let me see, where do I have Goodreads? Someplace on here. I'll just open up a new file of it. And let's see, The Borderlands. And this is a history of Ukraine. And this is a massive history of Ukraine going back, I want to say, at least 400 or 500 years. Let's see if I can find it on here. to my books on this one list. Here we go. And this is Borderland, A Journey Through the History of Ukraine by Anna, A-N-N-A Reed. And this is put out in 2000. I think that's when it was first published. And it goes in through a massive, so it does go through 1,000 years of history of Ukraine. So it really goes into a lot of the details of the conflict and everything else going on. And saw this mentioned a while ago. How many of you remember American Tail, the Steven Spielberg little animated movie where you had the little mouse that they emigrated?
Faisal the mouse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's on the history of Ukraine.
Really?
Yes. The cats were the Kazakhs. So that whole thing, they were, that's also based a lot on the history of Ukrainian immigration to the United States. You'll see a lot of similarities with how they dress, but that is based on that. So it's well worth seeing some of the history being used in common in some of our pop culture. So let's see, no-fly zone. Yeah, no-fly zones are they are really something that we don't need to be. Personally, I do not think we need to be involved with this. I think it's dangerous. Ukraine is not NATO. Yes, they wanted to be NATO. Now their President Zelensky has come out and said, no, they don't want to be part of NATO. Poland is part of NATO. And the Article 5 with Poland, if anything happens on Polish soil, Poland will activate Article 5. There's no question about that.
So Baron Gunmetal Guy is asking you what you say about no-fly zone, believing the media, etc.
Seeing if I've been up for about, 45 hours at this point? Fuck it, I don't care. Shoot him down. I finally get some sleep.
Yeah, with the with all that's going on, Germany has increased its military spending to 2% of its GDP. So Germany's getting the band back together.
So the concerns I have. Oh, sorry, Faust.
I was just going to say, I've seen people say bring in Japan into that too, but Japan has been pushing for. They've been a defensive force since World War II, the end of World War II, and they've been for probably almost 20 years now. Been trying to push the idea of having a offensive force again. So that started before any of this happened.
Yes, it did. And that happened, like you said, at least a good 20 years. And that's based upon China's saber rattling in the South China Sea, with them building the islands and everything off the shores of Vietnam and off of the Philippines, expanding Chinese territory and things like that. So that is something that they are been cautious about and everything else. There's still a lot of very, very bad blood between China and Japan from the occupation in Manchuria and then further south, which pretty much with that. So there's still a lot of heavy history going on, heavy history that's remembered there.
There's still a lot of resistance by the Japanese citizens, though, to becoming an offensive force.
Definitely. Anti-ship missiles to Ukraine. Do we really want to escalate our side to that? Do I see Do I
Is it
see
really
one
anything new,
stopping?
though?
Any of this? No. None of this is new.
I
None
mean, we did it in Vietnam.
of.
We did it when they invaded Afghanistan.
Hmm.
It's always been proxy wars. This is just the new one.
This is the first big one where it's a what's what I'm thinking of, a
It's
this
I see it.
close of a proxy war to between the nuclear powers.
I see it as just slightly different, which may not be a substantive difference really, but that it's not capitalism versus communism now. It's the U.S. What the U.S. side. It would be the U.S. versus a dictator,
Hmm.
which in my mind is slightly different, but is it enough to make a difference? You be the judge.
Yeah, send all the drug dealers to Chicago. That'd go over really well. The Russian mafia, I think, would have a nice say on that, and some of the Ukrainian mafia with it. One thing that I'm not sure how many people who are listening are aware of, Ukraine is one of the child sex trafficking capitals of the world. And that's under their current administration. The corruption that is there is significant. The amount of human trafficking through Ukraine is severe, and that's been heavily, heavily documented through multiple sources. Open Secret or is an organization that tracks a lot of the sex trafficking that goes on in a lot of the cases globally, and they're the ones who helped, besides Congressman Hawley, bring attention to the current selection candidate for the Supreme Court and her extreme leniency on pedophilia and child sex crimes. So this is something that does need to be kept an eye on, because it is such a significant issue going on. And good morning, Chris. That is something to be aware of. Is neither side there is pure and holy, to use a very naive term. Neither side's the good person on here.
Right now, Ukraine is the underdog. So
yeah,
and that so they come out as the victim, and their president is actually he was an actor.
Yes.
Another actor president. So he does well in front of the camera.
Very well. And so half his staff was on his production, on his acting, his actors guild or whatever. His actors troupe is a large significant of his cabinet. Good. Glad you guys had a good interview with Walk the Talk America.
It was really good. To touch on Gunmetal Guy's question here real quick about China and Taiwan, I was surprised. I thought China would move on Taiwan after this started while everybody was watching there. And I heard a reason why they wouldn't, and I wish I could remember what it was. But I was a little bit surprised that China didn't go ahead and move on Taiwan while everybody's attention was
wanted to see what happened to Russia.
Yeah, I think that's it. They want to see how this is going to come out and what the U.S. is. They want to see what the U.S. and NATO's response is going to be, because we are a treaty partner with Taiwan. So we are not a treaty partner with NATO. We are with Taiwan. So if China does attack Taiwan, we are treaty obligated to respond. Will we respond? I don't know. If something goes into Poland, by being a member of NATO, can activate Article 5, which requires U.S. response. That's also something that, me personally, if I was China and Chairman Pooh Bear, I would, yes, I know that's an insult, and that's my statement, not your statements on your channel.
I agree with you, so that's all right.
I don't want you guys to get a strike. And I just realized after I said that. I don't want, I would wait. I would hold off to see what's going on. Long game. They can wait. They have the ability to wait. And
they've been around a long time, so
yes, they have, and they look at this even longer.
We're just the barbarians.
Mm-hmm. So,
I was going to put a link to the Walk Talk America chat that
Mhm.
G23 did, but it's not there. I'm not sure why.
But Mike Sedini and Jake Wickersing, those two are amazing men. And I have sent many, many, many people over to their website for individuals who have questions. Are they going through excessive stress where they need to talk to a professional, or is something else going on? Or is this just a perception that their own personal stress levels are just higher than normal? So
I put a link to G23's channel. So if you're not familiar with his channel, go ahead and check him out. And hopefully, if there was an issue, he can get it edited and get it put back up.
Yeah, they're a great organization. I reference them. And for individuals who are in Washington State, Safer Homes is a partnership with the Second Amendment Foundation and one of the gun control groups through the University of Washington School of Social Work, Forefront Suicide Prevention. So we actually have our own dedicated resource, very similar to Walk the Talk America, here in Washington State. So do be aware of that also.
But Chris, you already have a wrench.
And so that's a wonderful program, wonderful thing, especially when you consider that I know within Washington, 70% of suicides are done by firearms on average, year over year. 2021 and the last part of 2020, the shift going to overdoses are becoming greater, and taking over firearm related suicide deaths. So that is something also to be aware of. And a lot of insurance companies, we're seeing this with the deaths due to complications of medical procedures that have been done over the last year and a half. Again, I don't want to get you guys a strike on your channel, so I'm going to be very, very careful on this wording. The insurance companies are not paying out on these death claims because of procedures being classified as experimental. And this is where a lot of information is going to be coming out, and they're going to have to reclassify causes of death. And the death certificates with that, because of insurance claims, I would say the suicide rate is probably even higher, because unlike a firearm where it's very obvious that the individual did a very specific act for suicide. Overdoses don't have that. And where somebody takes a drug or some sort of chemical for overdosing, that they may decide for insurance payouts and for the death certificate to list it as an overdose instead of the suicide that it is. That's why they're saying suicides are underreported. That may have probably came up in the conversation with Jake and with Mike. But both gentlemen are wonderful men. The program that they put together is incredible, extremely, extremely valuable. And
he is very passionate about it.
Yes, yes, he is. I've sat in on many of his classes. I've sat in on at least 4 of the classes that Jake has put on for continuing education for mental health professionals. And each class I have learned something new that I can use in the 2A fight here in Washington to counter the lies coming out. So this is coming through, and you can kind of bring this all back into what we were talking about a few moments ago with Russia. The amount of misinformation that is put out, not just by the major news programs with regards to firearms fatalities. Do I have social science education training? I have my background is in graphic arts with a minor in biology and chemistry. Never finished my degree. I switched 3.5 years in my program and decided that I needed a break. So I have enough school, enough hours for a master's degree, but not enough credits to actually do the thing. I read a lot. That's the best thing I will tell you. I read a lot. I talk to a lot of people and I listen. And suicide prevention is something that is very personal for me because it has directly affected my family more than once. And it's something that I don't want any other family to have to go through. One of my cousins, who was very much of an extrovert, lost her battle to wake up in the morning in September of last year. And her sister is still dealing with the severe grief on that. And Danielle's death hit the family hard. She was also very good at hiding when she was really having problems and having difficulty dealing with the stresses of everything. And the lockdowns, in my opinion, severely exacerbated her mental health for deterioration.
I can absolutely see that. Just with my son, when the difference between when he was going to school and when they were remote learning, he struggled with that. There was a marked difference in his personality. And then once the schools opened back up, it changed back to where he was more, the kid that he used to be. So I definitely believe there is a detriment to the lockdowns and isolation of people.
Oh yeah, we're going to be having there's going to be severe repercussions with the cognitive and social development of children going forward for at least 10 years minimum.
And something that I've heard brought up is just the wearing of the mask where the kids aren't getting the cues, the facial cues. And it's stunning development.
Yes, it is. Jake actually had Jake Wilkerson from Walk the Talk America. He is a clinical family psychologist. Can't remember which one is which. And thank you. He has actually brought up several studies that show the number of children who are failing social cues and things like that and social development, to be able to act outside their home with others and with strangers, and to grow within healthy relationships within society. And Gabriel, you are right. It's very difficult to determine if an overdose is a suicide or not without a note. It is extremely difficult, but that's the reason why they are able to, they know that it is underreported, because they do know it is that, and because of the insurance, because to not have a insurance payout for a death, for a death is significant for some families, and suicide is specifically excluded in many, many, many policies. So yeah, and Gunmetal brings up the whole thing again: context and conversations, not only verbal, it's expression and body language. Yes. The sounds between how the facial features are between crying and laughing, the sounds itself may be very similar to somebody who's not heard it before. It's the facial expressions that show the significant difference between that. And there was another thing that I saw where there was the young girl who was kidnapped out of Salt Lake City, Utah. God, I can't remember her name right now. A young woman, and she was snatched out of her home, and she had been taken for several years. And the individual who had taken her and who unfortunately had sexually assaulted her,
Was that Amy Smart, or was it?
Yeah, the Smart girl. Yeah, Amy or Emily Smart. She brought up that when she was there, and when they were out in public and everything else, she would be masked and they would be right there, and people were asking about her, and she's like, I'm right here, and nobody saw her. Nobody recognized her because of the mask. Nobody acknowledged that she was the child that everybody was looking for. And that Elizabeth Smart, thank you. That was a significant thing with how everything is identifying. And she's one of the ones who really, really spoke out about how damaging the masking of children are. And with that, I mean, you had young children committing suicide with a firearm during their Zoom sessions for their classes. I know of 6 incidences that have happened in several states over the last year and a half. That never should have happened. These were kids who never had an issue before, were so despondent. We know child abuse increased because the kids had no way of escaping what was happening at home. The shelters were being closed. So this goes back to me, why are we sending, with the whole thing with the original topic on here, is why are we sending billions of dollars of our money, because it is taxpayer money, to a foreign country when our own children need help? Yes, we have obligations with everything that's going on on the global stage, but nothing can be fixed on the global stage until we are able to repair ourselves at home. There's an old saying, charity begins at home. We need to be able to heal and help our children first before we can help the children abroad. It doesn't matter if we lose our children here. There's nothing for anyone else to come here then, if we don't have the ability to educate, feed, and house our children here. So, a bomb threat from a child who is, kids are bored at home. They don't know what else to do. They don't know how to deal with emotions that aren't based upon dopamine hits because of either social media, some of the video games, not all, the ones that entice you back in. So there are significant differences. So to bring this all back into a loop, do I feel that what's going on currently within Russia and Ukraine is significant for us here in US and everything and in the Western Hemisphere? Yes. We're going to have people starving because we're not going to have enough food to feed everybody. We're not going to have enough fertilizer. And that's a problem. And every week that this extends to where there's no resolution, personally, what I think, we've got a month of crop damage or crop yields that are not going to be met. And you're going to have kids who are not going to survive because they're not going to be able to have something to eat. And that's not just here in the US, but that's going to be in Africa and the Middle East. We're going to see explosions of food riots in Lebanon, in Egypt. Oh, Madeleine Albright, may she burn in hell next to that John McCain piece of shit.
Oops,
I am not a fan of John McCain, ever. The information that I've known, I know of him. I know him. I've met him socially. I know his family. I trust them less than I trust our current president with his granddaughters. So that gives you an idea of how little I trust the McCains.
I just want to say hi to CNT Designs and Arms.
Mm-hmm. Good morning. And
I have some good news.
Sure.
He's dead.
Who? McCain?
John McCain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank God I will dance on his grave in celebration. That's how much I feel about him. That's a conversation. If you ever want to have it and we see each other in person, ask me. I will not discuss it online. Ever. So with Madeleine Albright, she was willing to sacrifice 500,000 children for a political gain. That tells you how depraved many in Washington are when it comes to this stuff. And how they cannot be trusted, in my opinion. Yeah, and Washington was correct. Beware of foreign entanglements. I mean, young lady. Yes, I am a ginger. So the statements that they talk about the stereotypes of redheads is true. Our freckles are the souls that we have. The stereotype that our freckles are the souls that we have gathered.
There's an argument to be made that Washington started the First World War. The 7 Years' War.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There is on that. Although you got to give him kudos for showing up for the Whiskey Rebellion and actually showing up to the communities that did not want to pay that tax. He showed up in person. Every other president on something and on a conflict and everything else has sent others to do the negotiations. So, yes, you are. Yes, you know. You definitely do know. So, the conflict that we have going on currently with Ukraine has global implications that will shockwave to our country. There are 3 scenarios that I can see majors on a very high level, on the 50,000 foot level. If the no-fly zone is put into place, we will have war, because the shooting down of a plane to enforce a no-fly zone is an act of war. We will end up.
I don't see a no-fly zone.
Yeah, because of that. Because of that, there are serious, because of the serious implications of what a no-fly zone entails. I agree with you.
That and it's just, at least for the time being, it's not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
If
The other thing, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if Russia was asserting its air superiority and bombing from the air, maybe I could see something happening like that. But for at least right now, I don't see it as on the table.
Mm-hmm. The other thing I see is a stalemate of how, with everything going, that they'll negotiate a truce, because there are still negotiations going on at this time. And borders will be redrawn. The third is, this goes to both of them, both sides just laying waste to an area that survived World War I and World War II and is now being destroyed. So the architecture and the creative, the art, is destroyed. Stuff that will never can be replaced. I have serious reservations on that, because that's a history that we should always protect, regardless of, for the majority, regardless of who creates it. It needs to be protected because it shows a history of the people who are there, who have lived there, and of the past, and hopes and dreams for their future and of their children. So those are the 3 pathways that I see.
I think the truce is, it's probably what I was going to say. It's not in the Ukraine's best interest, but it kind of is, because it has the possibility to end the conflict the quickest, I think,
for the moment.
Yeah. It gives Russia what it wants, which is not good, but in the thinking is nations, it settles everybody down. I don't, I am not, I don't have a college degree. I'm not an educated person, really. The little bit of college that I took, I minored in sorority members mostly, but so I'm admitting that I do not have this. This is all just my opinion, my uneducated opinion. But I think the truce is the quickest way to end this. I don't know if Ukraine will want to give up anything. so I don't know if they'll go for it.
Well, 3 of the areas that are currently being occupied did actually vote to secede from Ukraine. These are areas where before World War II, they may have been Russian. And before World War I, they may have been Ukraine or Lithuanian or Polish-Lithuanian. The borders in these areas have moved multiple times over 500, 700, and 1,000 years. So you have people who are, and yes, Russia did move a lot of people into that area during the Soviet occupation, but you also had people there who were closer tied to Russia based upon culture and language than they were to Odessa with speaking Ukrainian, and some of the cultural things like that. So this, Donetsk, Crimea, and Luhansk, those are the 3. All 3 of those locations of those republics or territories, what have you, did vote to secede from Ukraine. Do we respect that? And it was a severe majority. It was a greater majority. It wasn't a simple majority. It was a greater majority on those votes. I was surprised about the Crimea vote, but it did happen.
Was this before or after the invasion of Crimea?
It was after the election of Zelensky. So I don't know if it was after the invasion into Crimea. So that
I think it would be then. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it was after I know it was after the election of Zelensky, which was the Orange Revolution, which Lindsey Graham, McCain, and several others were very vocal about taking the former president of Ukraine out and having Zelensky put in. So there's a lot of, besides Burisma, besides the Biden with the laptops and everything else, there's a lot going on where we've been involved as a political, into our political Congress and everything else into Ukraine. This isn't something new that's happened over the last 4 years. This has been something we've been involved with Ukraine for quite some time, and not a good way either. I would almost compare it, the actions going on, as shenanigans, similar to what happened with the Shah of Iran before he was overthrown by the Iranian Revolution due to issues going on between how the Shah treated political enemies and things like that. So there's a lot going on with that, and it's not necessarily good behavior. And when the war hawks, or really the chicken hawks from Congress, are involved with something, it makes me question, why are we there?
Yeah, I'll agree. Did you see that the border guard giving the Belarus ambassador 30 pieces of silver when he left the Ukraine?
No, I didn't. Oh my God, that would have been epic.
I don't think he accepted the silver, but on his way out, there was a border guard that tried to give him 30 pieces of silver.
Yeah, territorial claims go way back. Yeah. That whole area with the same thing. The Middle East, when you take a look at those boundaries, they're very, very straight. That was divided up not by how people's cultural heritages were, with language, with religion. The Kurds were pretty much carved up into 4 different countries to where they did not have their own country. And yet they are one of the largest ethnic groups in that area of the world between Turkey, Iran, and Iraq. So, yeah, you've got territorial claims. My husband's family is Czech Hungarian, meaning his family lived in the former in Czechoslovakia. I can't remember if they were on the Slovak or on the Czech side at this time. But they were Hungarian. They spoke Hungarian first. They were Hungarian. But the way the borders have been carved out multiple times and the way the borders have been moved, they never moved. The country that they were in, the borders changed. So that is a significant part of what's going on over there, what's going on in Ukraine, Crimea, and that part of Russia. So Philippines were part of the United States. Yeah, that was the same war that gave Cuba and Puerto Rico independence from Spain, where Puerto Rico became a Commonwealth of the United States, and Cuba got its own independence. And I believe that was also with Guam too. Guam might have been part of that. I can't quite remember on that, but that I believe was out of the Spanish-American War. With that was another. Speaking of false flags, the Maine. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense with Churchill and the border of Jordan. Yeah, chicken hawk. They are chicken hawks. They very, very, very much are chicken hawks, and their sons, their daughters are not being sent off to war. They're the ones who are not having their family lives destroyed. They're the ones who are not having their fathers, their brothers, their sons going through PTSD because of what they saw overseas, what they heard overseas, and just the stress. None of those 500 and some odd members that sit in Congress have their children going. Now, we do have a few members who are, who have fought and things like that. That's great. That's wonderful. No more. This is the only thing that I respect Tulsi Gabbard on. She does not want war. I can respect her on that. She is a socialist, on the socialist side.
Yeah, the term chicken hawk, it's changed. It was used to shame the Republicans, but it was chicken hawk. The term, they used it because it used to be a term for pedophiles.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah, so every time I hear chicken hawk, I think of the more, well, a chicken hawk was a bird that ate chicks, but then, it was used to describe pedophiles.
That's first. I've never heard of that before. I'll have to see where that came, how that that whole history of the language and everything else came from. That. Yeah, that's fascinating.
The 90s.
Okay.
The Democrats started using it on Republicans for the war hawks.
Yeah. Yeah, the 90s were a weird decade. Very, very weird decade.
Well, I think we beat the snot out of that topic.
Yes, definitely.
It's a good place to end, I think. And I want to, as always, Sharon, I really appreciate you coming on. You're an unbelievable wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
And it makes my chat so much easier.
So you had stepped away and I brought up, there's a book called Borderland, A Journey Through the History of Ukraine. If you can get a copy of that book, it will help explain some of the history of what is going on with everything. And let's see if I can get the ISBN numbers, because that's the big key.
Oh shit! We forgot to do the giveaway.
Oh, you need to do the giveaway.
Giveaway.
Yeah, we were giving away javelins and tractors.
Oh.
You can 3D print one of the rockets now, one of the rocket launchers. Defense Distributed posted the information on it. It's a recoilless, shoulder-mounted device. Yeah. Can't stop the signal anymore.
So is there anything you want to plug or anything you got going on, Sharon?
We're gonna have our Pink Pistol events coming up in May. We'll start hopefully, and then we'll be hopefully at Seattle Pride, Capitol Hill Block Party. If Tacoma Pride is there also, we'll be there. I just found out that there's an individual who is running up against Lori Jenkins, the Speaker of the House in Washington State in District 27, which is good because he is a conservative individual and probably the first person I've seen in a while who might give the speaker a run for her money. And we might have a chance of making her re-election campaign very costly for her. And if we're lucky, get her voted out.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed, knock on wood. Everything for that. So that's pretty much it. If people are curious in Washington State about how to get active and everything else, the Washington Civil Rights Association Discord channel, there is a Facebook group, but the Facebook group is heavily moderated, and that is due to Facebook rules. Myself, I am on almost all social media platforms. I'm still waiting for my Truth Social account to get approved. Yes, I'm on there, but I'm also on Bastion, Mastodon, Getter, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, I'm on it.
And there's a link in the description for the Washington State Civil Rights Association. Yeah. Oh, well, since you mentioned the mods, yeah, the overnight Discord, there's new TOS that are going. They're Monday, I believe, that are coming into effect. So the mods are being extra careful now because it's horrible. The new terms of service.
Yes, they are.
We're not that bad. I mean, we only have like one major rule.
But they're wanting to use offline comments and actions and things like that to ban somebody, which is what got Sydney Watson banned off of Patreon recently based on her YouTube channel and some of her other commentaries in one of her shows. Patreon banned her. They kicked her off based upon that. And I know with Pink Pistols and with the WCRA, we're looking at getting a backup server and things like that on Gilded as a way of Baron. I know we need to go through that one later on.
Oh, I could have that
sleep.
set up in 1 minute.
I know, but I want you to have some sleep first because I know what it feels like to run multiple hours. without sleep, and that's not.
I want to hit
pleasant.
that 48-hour mark.
No, you don't. Take advice from an old woman. You don't.
You're gonna get into that psychosis zone.
I'm already
Yeah.
there. I'm seeing a monkey in the bottom left, and he hasn't spoken once.
So DJ, thanks for coming on. When is there going to be a down the rabbit hole chat with DJ?
Man, we could put that on the schedule near about any time, man.
Holy shit! You
pleasure to
guys
be-
see this too?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Talking
I thought it was
monkey.
just me.
Nice, Barrett. Yeah, I am. Your friendly simian, for sure. But yeah, Foss anytime, man. That'd be great. Look forward to it.
No, you do it.
Me do.
You do it. So it's all DJ. It's all out of your head. All crafted by you.
I'll take that under advisement.
I think it would be interesting. I would watch.
Party of one. Right on, man.
How about you, Baron? Before you pass out, is there anything you want to plug or promote? Or
I'm on my fifth wind. I might stay up another day.
meth is a hell of a drug.
Hey, I wish it was that. I could stop. Fuck.
No, once you start, it's
No,
hard
I
to
meant
stop.
I wish it was something
Oh,
physical causing it that I could stop, get
Yeah.
some sleep.
so you got anything?
Building a bunker for the nuclear apocalypse. It's taken me a while.
6 feet of dirt on all sides.
Yep.
Okay. I would help you if I could, but it's a commute for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to promote. I might put out some videos if I ever get around to making videos again. I've got a couple that I kind of started, but I trashed, so I got to redo. So those have gone nowhere.
Yeah,
But-
I've been burned out since the legislative period ended.
Oh, this was we burned as hard as we were burnt out. The other side was just as burned. That I do know. We made them work for that steel that they did.
Good.
They're going to have to give themselves a raise now if they work so hard.
Now they're going to be voted out of office. Is what's going to happen.
But so I want to just thank everybody that was out in the chat and thank anybody that watches this in replay and gets this far to hear me thanking you. Thank you. Other than that, in what time is it now? 3. So in about 4 hours, there's going to be a morning chat on Gizzard Gary's channel.
No shit.
Yep. His Sunday morning chat. It's an open forum where they just kind of discuss whatever everybody wants to discuss. So if you're up looking for something to listen to, maybe tune into him. Other than that, I hope everybody has a good day.
You still here? It's over. Go home.